everyone, and welcome to the Football Engineer Podcast. I'm your host, Jose, and once again, I'd like to introduce my friends, Juan Carlos Valladares. Juan Carlos?
Hey, Jose, how are you?
Good. And Sergio Flores. How are you doing, Sergio?
Hi, I'm doing fine. Ready to start.
Excellent. So, as you all know, the World Cup ends on Sunday, and our lives once again become devoid of any meaning. So we kind of have to find something else to do in the podcast. So we are basically shifting over to what will become our usual formula during the European club season. We will have a weekly podcast reviewing what's going on mostly in Spanish football, but also a bit of what the English and Italian clubs are doing. And of course, this week and the big news about Ronaldo is probably the best way to kick off this new format. So before going, though, into the big subject of the week, I think it's a good time to review some of the transfers that happened during the week. All right, so now it's time to talk about the transfers that happened during the week, and let's start with something that probably Sergio, who is an Arsenal fan, will be very happy to talk about the case of Lucas Torreira going to Arsenal.
Yeah, I'm very happy about that signing. Arsenal has badly needed some fresh blood, fresh signings. We were recycling players that time and time again were proven not enough to gain some serious competitive advantages in Europe. And so Torreira is a very special signing for Arsenal, I believe. So, and this is because he is a mixture of both a strong defending deep line playmaker and a very dynamic at it. Plus, he is comfortable with short passes and moving around. So I think that Arsenal, since losing Song in their midfield, they haven't been able to acquire a player that balances their midfield, such as this one. So I'm very happy about it.
Mm-hmm. And the combination of Emery and Lucas Torreira sounds pretty exciting, right, Juan Carlos?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun to see, simply because he's young and we've seen him great at the World Cup. He had a great season at Sampdoria, and I think a lot of us just are excited to see what Emery does, and his strengths play very well to the Premiership. The fact that he's strong and that he's athletic and that he's quick and he's concentrated, I feel like he's going to suit in perfectly in England. And then I think Emery will use him well. Arsenal need a player like him, someone who brings energy, who can play the short passes, but is also not afraid of going into duels, particularly because they lost Wilshere. And I feel like this is a good replacement with the upside, with a high roof of talent and where he can get to. So good for Arsenal.
Absolutely. And then now going into the next signing, which is something that I haven't shut up about throughout the entire week, the case of Merino going to Real Sociedad. So just to give a bit of an introduction on the case of Merino, he was playing originally for Osasuna in the second division, and he played really well between 2014 and 2016. Then got signed up by Dortmund, played there for a year, or didn't play there for a year because he had few chances, and then he moved over to Newcastle, where things seemed to be going pretty well, but then he got a back injury, his performance decreased, and eventually he lost the starting spot. And these days, because he wasn't having that much playing time, I guess he decided to go to Real Sociedad and back to sort of his home region, closer to Navarre and to the Basque country. So any thoughts on this?
I'm excited for it. I think him alongside Ieramendi it could potentially be a very fun midfield for La Real Sociedad. They can, I feel like they complement each other well. Merino, a ball winner, strong and very useful, and Ieramendi is also strong and a good ball winner, but he's become more of a deep line playmaker for Real Sociedad, someone who can pull the strings from deep and come closer to the box and maybe help move the ball around the box. So I think they're a good complement to each other. We'll see how the former Leganés coach Garitano uses him. I think he will cherish the opportunity of training such a talent and developing him, because this is the kind of player I think he likes, a player who gets stuck in, who will do the dirty work, and I'm excited for this one too.
Yes, and I agree about them being very complimentary. And this comes at a really good time now that Xavi Prieto is leaving the club. So this means that the club already needed someone else to slot into the midfield, and I think the combination of like that midfield trio of Merino, Ilarramendi, and Zurutuza can be very stimulating, to be honest. And now it's time to go into the Barca transfers. Today, this week, the thing that we've been waiting for a while finally happened, which is Artur to Barca, which at this point I didn't even expect this was going to happen this summer.
I think we are all a little wary about, a player coming from South America, particularly at that position, where it requires, and at Barcelona, it's so many things that are staggered on the pressure for Arthur. It's a central midfielder coming from South America with the price tag of being Brazilian. There's a lot of pressure coming into him after Iniesta retires. There's a lot of pressure on this transfer, but from what I've seen of him at the Copa Libertadores and the Brasileirao, he's clearly talented. I thought there might have been use for him even going to the World Cup for Brazil. They could have used a player like him at some point. I was slightly disappointed that he didn't make it. I understand the reason. There's so much talent for Brazil in every position, so I understand him not making it. But the guy certainly has talent, and I'm excited for Valverde. And having him, he has been good molder of central midfielders.
Rakitic, yes.
Rakitic, for example, excellent example. He's the main example we can bring up. From his average passes went from, I don't remember the exact numbers, but his average passes have increased at least, I think, double since Valverde came to Barcelona. And so Rakitic might have to cover a lot more for Busquets this season. Rakitic will be able to move around, and Artur might have to fill in this role, particularly with Paulinho moving out and no Iniesta. There's going to be a lot of game time for him.
Yes. Any thoughts, Sergio?
I like this signing. I really like it. I believe there's a very limited pool of players that Barca could pick from, and I believe he's one of the best options toward the market. He's very dynamic. He has mastered to some point the long pass game. He's competent with a short pass game as well. He's strong. He has a low center of gravity. And most importantly, talking in Barca code, he knows how to turn and receive the ball quickly. He knows how to receive it, turn, and give it away. So that's very important. I remember that was one of the main criticisms with Seri going to Barca. He wasn't a master of those arts. And most importantly, I believe Arthur is a very physical and dynamic player, kind of like Sergio Roberto. So I believe he's like the best signing on the midfield there was right now, short of Verratti maybe last year. I believe he will be able to, if things go well, to reduce the burden on Messi of going down and carrying the ball upward, at least in that aspect. But I'm very happy about the signing. My main doubt would be if he's able to work together with the team in the tight Barcelona tactical scheme. But other than that, order and discipline, I believe he's a perfect signing. I'm very happy about that.
Oh, those are... That's a bit of high expectations. I mean, there's a bit of a gulf still between like players like Verratti and someone like Arthur. We still have to see how he adapts. But to be honest, this is one of the cases I've been usually very wary about, like South American midfield controllers. But after but just watching him play a bit, and it does make you feel excited. It does make you feel like a player who can actually adapt to the European game rhythm pretty well.
I think Sergio just likes Bartomeu too much, to be honest.
Oh God, that would have a lot of Barca fans around here kill you. But going into the next Barca signing, the case of Clement Lenglet, who just got signed this week, even though this was a signing that had been rumored for months. I think this is actually another very good signing, and another signing with a lot of future. So, any thoughts?
Yeah.
Just great pronunciation there with Lenglet. It was beautiful. I think, he's a great signing, young center back. Who knows what's going to happen with Jerry Mina. Barca definitely had some issues there in the Roma game that I think linger in the back of the mind with Piqué and Umtiti. And I feel like they want to bring them competition, and they want to make sure that they're not comfortable where they are at, and that there is someone trying to take their position and someone who has the talent to take their position if they're not on their game. And he's a very good defender. He's fine with the ball. He won't be burdened by having it at his feet. So I think it's another good signing for Barca, who's having a good summer so far.
Yes, so far things are going out well, and yes, we might sound a bit cruel on Jerry Mina, and the guy is really likable, but I still have my doubts. I still think that Jerry Mina is a bit of it's still far. I mean, Lenglet is still a bit far from a finished product, but Jerry Mina is even further away from being a finished product. Any thoughts, Sergio?
Yeah, Jerry Mina was a pet. And the only reason why he's still there, well, other than his height and his right foot profile, would be that it would be embarrassing to let him go right now. Really embarrassing. So there's no other right foot defender in Barca, right? Other than Piqué?
Yeah. It's Mina, the right footed substitute.
Yeah, so considering that, I believe that the game plan here is clear. I believe Vermaelen is the one that has to go. He's a good player, reliable, but too injury prone, and football speaking wise, he's old. So Lenglet, I believe, is 22, 23. He's the future. He's a proven. He's on the road to become a proven value in the European soccer, and so I believe that's a very good signing as well. But I do believe Vermaelen is going to stay this. He should stay this year. See what happens over there.
Yeah, and I mean, Vermaelen was already. I mean, a year ago he was already planning to leave and he couldn't. So I think that this summer he's actually gonna make it out. But
and surprisingly for Barca, they got some value into Vermaelen. They might be able to get a little something back from it, unlike last year where they would have gotten nothing. So in that sense, at least Barca, gave themselves a little leeway.
Yes, that's very true. And finally, now that we're done with the Barca signings, time to go a bit into Premier League signings. So this week, City finally got to sign Riyad Mahrez. So I have to be honest. Like, of course, you see the signing, and this is like, yes, good for City, but it's not the kind of signing that makes me think, oh, now City is going to be more competitive in the Champions League, for example. It's not like the kind of signing that levels up Manchester City. What do you guys think?
Yeah, agreed. City's weaknesses are not where Riyad Mahrez is. They've got so much talent around the wings and the box, and that's not where they need to improve. I think we all felt. I mean, the World Cup maybe was a little microcosm of why Fernandinho isn't the player who will make sure your team wins a trophy like the Champions League or a World Cup. Not because he's bad, but there's a certain dirtiness that you're supposed to have, and I think we hope for City to have a signing like that, someone who's wily, who's willing to give in a tackle. They needed that against Liverpool so much, and they lack it. And so I mean, I'm excited to see. I mean, all the talent of City with Pep Guardiola. That's always going to be fun. But clearly, City needs something a little different than Riyad Mahrez to take the step up in the Champions League. I do think it's a great signing for the Premier League simply because we know the English season's so grueling without a winter break and all the cup games and the winter. It's tough in England, and so adding depth is always useful.
Yes. Any thoughts, Sergio?
Yeah, well, about Mahrez, I was reading recently that even he doesn't know where he's gonna play on the Guardiola scheme on City. Do you guys have an idea where will he playing?
Oh,
Apart from
definitely.
right winger?
Definitely on the right wing. And of course, the ones who are in problems there are Sterling and especially Bernardo Silva, who I have no idea what he'll do now because...
Yeah, that competition there with Bernardo Silva is going to be interesting. I think Bernardo Silva is more talented than Riyad Mahrez, and Riyad Mahrez is very talented. But I also think Riyad Mahrez is a very punctual player. He has this very key moments where he's able to get a shot off and win a game that Bernardo Silva has yet to prove at City. He did have it at Monaco. So, I think that sort of weighs in for City.
I agree with that. Do you think will he be getting enough game time to be like satisfied with himself? I'm not sure about that.
Well, for Mahrez, again here. The one I'm worried about is Bernardo Silva. Then I think Sterling and Mahrez can. I think they will be important enough in Guardiola's plans, but I'm not sure if Silva will be able to make it. And
right.
Yeah.
What about the possibility of taking David Silva's position for certain games? Seeing as David Silva is getting older, Riyad Mahrez could drop deeper potentially. He does have a skill set that could be helpful in that position. What do you guys think that may be a possibility?
Now, that is a very interesting idea because the club does have to start looking for a replacement for David Silva. So I actually like that. And talking about going into midfield areas, we can also talk about the case of Jean-Michel Seri and going to Fulham after, which is, of course, a bit shocking because we talk about the guy that a year ago was supposed to go to Barca. So I guess the question is, what happened?
I think he's just not proven at that level, and that for his age, it would have been a massive step up from where he was to going to Barcelona. Ligue 1, as it's a fun league. There's a lot of great talent there, but I think the demands we brought uncertainty to the Barcelona board on spending money, and I think it would have been seen a lot as a desperate move for Barcelona because of being in disarray. At that point, Real Madrid had won 2 Champions League in a row. Madrid had won the League 2 that year. So I think at the time it was Barca just making sure they didn't make a rash decision. Kudos to the board at Barcelona for not succumbing to the cries for that signing. I do think he's a great signing for a promoted team in the Premier League. I think he suits the Premier League well because he's physically very fit, but he's also technically above the kind of player that most promoted teams in the Premier League would have. Technically, he's very good. He can get a shot off. He can get to the byline. So I think it's a good signing for Fulham. And and that's if Ryan Sessegnon, the young talent, wasn't enough to convince you to watch them, maybe Seri will be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I believe yes. Considering the context, it's a very good signing for Fulham, but I'm not sure if he's gonna fit very well in the Premier League. I was reading some reports by scouts, and I believe the scouting teams, both on Barcelona and other teams, were the deciding factor in whether signing him or not. And so those reports said that he was very poor under pressure, and that he wasn't enough to carry the team from the defenders upward. So I don't know if he's gonna make it, like work his name on the Premier League. I'm not sure.
Not to generalize the Premier League, I guess, but typically the Premier League's pressure is very one player and a bit disorganized. So I think he'll, as long as he's able to turn from the one player that gets to him, he should be fine. It's not like in La Liga where, and this is just very generalized speaking, where typically the pressure is very onto where your passes would be, which I think he would struggle more with. At the Premier League, you skip one player, there's so much space typically because it's such a counter-attacking league. I think he will do fine.
Yes, I agree with Sergio a bit on the press resistance side, but at the same time, I think the EPL, while it is true that it is more physical, players still like to press and everything, it's a less tactical press, to put it that way, than the ones you have in La Liga. And finally, I think we're going to talk about the case of, Shaqiri to Liverpool, which came up a bit unexpectedly, but honestly, for 15 million, it doesn't sound like a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, he comes from a team. I think the reason the price was it because Stoke City had been relegated, right? So I think they had a clause where if he gets relegated, he could go for that nice price. And he's like unlikely to take the spot away from Salah, Mane, or Firmino. But I think he has 4 or 5 games a season where Liverpool can just plug him in there, and they need depth. They're going to be in a lot of games, and they can plug him in there, and he can win you a game. He can carry you for 20, 25 minutes. So I think it's a good signing. Liverpool do need depth, and I mean they're having probably the best summer out of anyone in Europe. And so adding all these players, I can't wait to see Liverpool and Klopp and all these athletic players they've gotten. It's pretty exciting.
Exactly. Yes. I would agree with that. I believe Shaqiri, I don't know him that well, but from the games I've seen from him, I get the perception he's a very physical player with a good medium long range shot, I believe. And I get the impression from Liverpool that they're building a very strong, weak physical squad, similar to or fit to play the way Dortmund played under Klopp's management. So I do think it's a very good signing for them.
Yes, and again, much needed squad depth. So I think we've done a good job talking about transfers, but of course we cannot let this obscure what is the biggest transfer news of the week, which is, of course, the case of Ronaldo, who we're going to talk about right now. It's time to talk about the big transfer of the week, the big transfer of the summer, of the season, and of God knows how many years, because I don't remember. When's the last time we have Neymar, but even Neymar was a bit of an upcoming star. When's the last time we had the case of a player being transferred to another club, close to the peak of his powers and being the best player in the world?
Maybe Ronaldo?
Ronaldo himself. Cristiano, right? Or Kaká?
Kaká.
Yeah. Although Kaká, that I don't remember how Kaká was doing before the transfer to Real Madrid.
I mean, he was only a season and a half away out from his Ballon d'Or at that point, and he had a couple of injuries. Cristiano had just won his first. He had won the Ballon d'Or the season prior. He had been to the Champions League final. So I mean, maybe I think Cristiano and Kaká both by Real Madrid that same season are the last time we had players at their peaks.
That's true.
Yeah. So it's of course it's a big deal. So I think I'd like first to begin this by saying, what does this transfer mean for Ronaldo himself? How does this go into the legend of Ronaldo and what he's achieved throughout his career?
Yeah, I think it would have been better if he would announce that on Sunday, right, on the World Cup final. I was reading that too. That would have been more fun.
Yes, we were all disappointed that he's not ambitious enough to try to upstage the World Cup final.
Yeah,
signing.
But seriously, I believe this is his pre-retirement move. I think it's he wants to prove himself one last time and his fans that he can. Well, this will be his third big league, right? And so, from what I've heard, he wants that challenge. I believe this is a perfect time for him to leave Real Madrid. He has become a historic figure, uh, maximum goal scorer, 3 Champions League in a row. I believe he has nothing else to prove to Real Madrid. And
Yeah. And I mean, what it's funny is that this guy is such a monster that at the age that everyone else is thinking about like moving to Qatar to the MLS, this guy is moving to Serie A.
Yeah, Cristiano. I mean, Cristiano is incredible. I think he's one of the players of all time. It's crazy, right? When he moved to Real Madrid, he wore number 9 the first season because Raúl was still there. Then he got number 7, and wearing number 7 for Real Madrid after Raúl, that could not have been easy. And he just took it upon himself. He took the mantle and took it farther. He's probably one of the 2 best players in Real Madrid history, if not the best. He is. He's won as much as he's won, but I think for his legacy in general, moving to Juventus means having to motivate himself again and find reasons why he needs to show why he's the best again. I think he moves out from being on top at Real Madrid. It was going to be tough to find another motivation at this point. But I think at Juventus, having this sort of chip on his shoulder that, Real Madrid did not want to pay him as much as, Barcelona pay Messi, that will drive him. He's going to want to prove them wrong. He's going to want to win this Champions League for Juventus like no player has since 97 for Juve or 96. And so I think he's going to be great, and I think Juventus are smart enough on using him as sparingly as possible to save him for those special nights. And I'm very much looking forward to what he can do and how he's going to improve his legacy at Juventus, because I don't think anything that happens at Juve will tarnish his legacy. It's already set as a gold standard of a football career, but he can only improve upon it, I think, at Juve, and it should be fun.
Yes, and it's true. I agree with that. With the fact that if the transfer doesn't go like the way it's expected, everyone is going to be blaming more Juventus because, like, why do you buy a 34-year-old? But and of course, if this were like your regular Moneyball kind of stuff, you would think, of course, yeah, it's a good idea to sell like your 34-year-old into another club, and it's a bad idea if you're the buying club to buy him. But this is not a normal 34-year-old.
No, although I would agree with the Moneyball version for Real Madrid, it's a perfect deal for them. I mean, they bought him for 100 million. Well, then they sell it for 100 million. They don't lose money in the transaction, and they take the best years out of him.
Well, is it? But what I think, I mean, is there more for Ronaldo to win? Like, is it worth it for Real Madrid to maybe, does Ronaldo still have a couple more years where he can be incredibly dominant in the Champions League? Are Real Madrid leaving trophies on the table? And I mean, is a money move worth leaving maybe another Champions League on the table? I think most Real Madrid supporters would say no. So that's where I'm worried for Real Madrid. It's hard to replace not just the goal output, which obviously it's tough to replace, but the player you can hang your hat on as a club. It's not an easy thing to replace.
Yes, and now before going fully into like the entire Real Madrid subject, I mean let's just go into more detail about how long do we think this guy can last playing at a top level, because he says he can play all the way till 41, and he says it with a reason, because when he's 41, it's the 2026 World Cup. This guy actually wants to play the 2026 World Cup. And I believe him when he says that. The question is how long he will be at the very top level. How many years do you give him?
I mean, think about it. I think about it this way. He's had very few bad injuries that have kept him out for long. So I mean, physically he looks great. He's such a workaholic on his body. And Serie A, while it's tough tactically and there's some, tough defenders there, there's also a slower pace, which I think would suit him at this point in his career, where maybe his knees aren't where they were and where his pace isn't where it used to be. So I think it's a great move for him in that sense, and Serie A might make him last longer. We've seen players age in Serie A incredibly well. Sidor, for example, Pirlo, and so I think
Totti,
and can you? I can see it in 7-8 years of Ronaldo coming off the bench for a big team and coming in, giving 20 minutes and winning a big game for a big team in the Champions League. So I think he could definitely do it to 41. My biggest concern with Cristiano is more of motivation. If he keeps on winning, what else is there to keep on doing at that point?
Yeah,
I completely agree. Yeah, and I also remember an interview that was done to Morata when he went to Chelsea, and he said one of his answers that Serie A teams, especially Juventus under the tactics he played under, usually played for the forward. So that's how Ronaldo has been slowly evolving to. He's still a killer player, dominating all three lanes of attack, and he's extremely mobile. But I believe that emphasis on strikers that the Serie A has will also benefit him as well.
Mm-hmm. That's actually a nice point. So now I'd like to now to fully transition into like, what does this mean for Real Madrid? And we had already started this conversation a bit with whether this was a good deal for Real Madrid or not. And of course, I mean, it makes sense the way Sergio puts it. But again, I just got a feeling that Real Madrid could still have two or three more years of this like golden backbone that they built with Ramos, Modric, Ronaldo, and Marcelo. Like, that's like the veteran backbone of Real Madrid. And I thought that they could still be milked for, a couple more Champions League titles. Who knows?
But at what cost?
Well, me and you, we've always had this discussion whether over the money and winning. I remember a long time ago, I don't remember, an executive for Espanyol. He was a general director. I don't remember who he said. He said he would be willing to mortgage the club if it meant winning one Champions League. Sometimes the memories of it for the supporters, at least, it's knowing that you won is worth. A supporter doesn't care about how much is being spent. A supporter just wants to have his team win, and Ronaldo helps that more than pretty much any other player in the world. So, I mean, while I understand that I understand the money aspects of Real Madrid doing this and being economically responsible, I feel like they leave trophies on the table without Cristiano.
And going back into like your question of whether it's worth it, we also have to consider that Harry Kane, Neymar, and Mbappe signed new contracts like within the last 12 months. I think it would have been useful to have Ronaldo for another couple years before going into the replacement options, because right now signing any of the three players I mentioned, who I think are the three most qualified ones to like replace Ronaldo's goal-scoring burden, I think it would have been better to wait a bit more, because right now it's going to be hard to sign them.
Is there a player in the world other than Messi that can fully replace Ronaldo?
No, but there are levels, because at this point, the best replacement that Real Madrid have for Ronaldo is already in the club. It's Gareth Bale.
Or precisely that. I believe there's no player that can right now guarantee you 40, 50 games in a season like Ronaldo other than Messi. So what I think Real Madrid is thinking on doing is on enabling their pool of very talented players to distribute those goals among them. So we have Bale, we have Isco, we have Lucas, and we have Asensio, right? Plus,
Yes.
any talent. I mean, Ronaldo's departure helps all of them. I believe that they may be forfeiting a Champions League trophy right now, but they'll be able to develop their most talented players that year after year are getting older and without any proper opportunity to shine.
It's just out of all those players you mentioned, right? I mean, if we're distributing 50 goals out of all those players, that means
Let's
upping.
not worry. Benzema's going to score like 30 goals next season, and we're going to be good.
Yeah, of course. I mean, don't get me wrong. Karim is. I mean, obviously, this past couple of seasons hasn't been great, but I mean, obviously, Real Madrid are not going to trust them to carry the goal bearing load. But I think there's something to be done with Karim and another forward that could, Benzema could definitely be a helpful aid.
I'd like to think that it's not next season. The following seasons with Karim are not going to be worse than the last two.
Right. That's why he's too talented for what we've seen, and maybe we see it a lot with Messi too. It's just a lot of the times that the team plays so much for one player. The other players sometimes have become less accustomed to doing what they're used to do because they're trying to play for this one player. Yeah. Because obviously that player deserves to be played for, not a negative. But then they come up against having to find their groove again and finding their own version of themselves outside of playing for this player. So yes, there could be hope for Benzema in this coming seasons. But I think a player that we haven't talked about, and maybe Real Madrid could be willing. I mean, two players I think that Real Madrid could take a gamble on and try to persuade to come to the Bernabeu. One is Icardi. Yes, he's a Inter Milan leader, and everything that you want. But when the Bernabeu calls, you would drop everything at that moment. So I think he could be a good replacement. He is a player that is great in the box. He'll finish anything that falls in there. He'll put his boot through it, and he's a hard worker. So I think he could be a great player. And there's on the other side of the age spectrum, maybe not too much, but our friend Robert Lewandowski, he could be the asset that could come in and try to be a bridge between, as you said, the contract gap from Cristiano leaving and players that just signed their contracts. He could be a player who could stopgap that if Bayern Munich are willing to negotiate. So I think there's some options out there for Real Madrid that would keep them competitive and give them goals, while at the same time giving them time to come back for one of the superstars at some point.
Thoughts, Sergio?
Yeah, I believe. I'm not sure if I would emphasize so much on, or maybe I'm wrong, on getting a goal scorer, a guy that I would take this chance to booster the players I have. And if I would have to bring someone for Real Madrid, that would be Mbappe. For me, there's not a debate over there. He's young, he has much to accomplish, much to learn, but he is the future. And I believe if correctly molded, he could become a huge playmaker and a huge goal maker. So,
yeah, I mean, my main worry about that statement is just that without a player like Ronaldo, the good thing about players like Ronaldo and Messi is that they get you goals even if your team is not playing well. Without Ronaldo, now this means that Real Madrid is actually going to have to play well most of the time, which honestly under Zidane, they often didn't.
Right. It's the issue of, you have the superstar player who pulls games out of his what, and so it's a quandary for Real Madrid, because also you have Luka Modric, who, while he's we've seen his World Cup is great, he's also aging and he is prone to missing big chunks of a season. So you're starting to put a lot of burden now already on players like Toni Kroos, and who, while he's still a machine and incredible, maybe it could be a lot of a burden. You're starting to put a burden on Asensio to get more goals. You're starting to put a burden on Isco to not only keep the ball and make sure the team flows well and also get goals. I think you need a goal scorer because of that, because you don't want to put a goal scoring burden on these players who already have all these other jobs.
That makes sense. Yes.
Unless Gareth Bale breaks out and it's like, oh no, just Cristiano was really just shutting the door for him, and never mind, Gareth Bale is the player we thought he could be. But again, injuries with Gareth and inconsistencies, there's too much room for doubt for Real Madrid to take that risk.
Yes, and while I agree with Sergio that it would be nice like to start focusing more the team and players, like for example Isco and Asensio, it is true that to compensate like the exit of Ronaldo, it would require players like Isco and Asensio to have a goal scoring productivity that we haven't seen from them up to now. It would require them to do like new things that they haven't done consistently before. That's my main worry. Of course, Asensio has to level up at some point because I think the last 2 years are, of course, very promising, but he's not productive enough yet.
That's right. And having to play the league against Messi and company, you need consistency. Even the best Ronaldo sometimes couldn't catch up against the whole Barcelona machine, right? Even his huge goal sack, he wasn't able to. So yeah, I think these players have to level up. But I don't worry too much about Real Madrid in terms of finding a replacement, and especially in having the talent to make up to it.
A quick question, just I guess, do you guys think that maybe with Ronaldo leaving and maybe Barcelona also have a bit of a foot off the pedal kind of season where they're like, oh, Cristiano's not there, and maybe opens up the season to more of the other teams, Atleti, Valencia, Sevilla, to maybe make a run at the league title?
That could be interesting, especially in the case of Atletico, who are armed to the teeth now. So,
I think that question depends solely on Messi and how he feels, because we saw Real Madrid fall behind this last season, like very early on the league, and Barcelona didn't take their foot off the pedal. So it will depend on Messi. That's a very interesting question. How will Messi take this? Will his production decline drastically from here on or not?
Yeah, I mean, Messi's changed over the years, but yes, one also starts wondering like when's the decline gonna start for him too? Because
as much as they don't like to admit it, they definitely drove each other to push themselves to be better, to try to win, to do it every weekend. I think there's that. I think there's going to be a drop off, maybe not a huge one, but I think there's going to be a little bit of a drop off in both points by Barcelona and top teams in the league, and a drop off from Messi and his productivity.
Yeah, and before going into the final topic of Juventus, I'd also like to go back a bit to the subject of Gareth Bale, because I think this is, unless he and his agent decide to still leave Real Madrid, I think it's a bit exciting, at least for me, that this might be it. Like, this is the moment that Gareth Bale has been waiting for the last 5 years, because this guy has been saying, well, I don't like playing on the wing. I want to go back to playing in the middle, or a role similar to what he plays in Wales, which is basically like a Messi-style striker who does everything. And I'd be excited to see if Real Madrid could do that with him, so that we could see if finally we could get that Gareth at full power that we haven't been able to see very often in the club scene.
Right. That last season at Tottenham was so much fun. He was winning games. He was cutting inside and taking shots, making passes, beating defenders. He was spectacular. There was a point this season where I thought there might have been a turning point. He had an incredible game in Anoeta this past season. And I thought, man, this is it. He's back. He's going to do it. And
he got injured.
He got injured, and the rest of the season was, sort of disappointing. I mean, the Champions League goal kind of, put some makeup on the season, but Gareth Bale is not delivered so far for Real Madrid in the way that we expected him. He's delivered in big moments, and he's been huge in finals. But I think just the week-to-week dominance that we saw in that last season at Tottenham, we thought maybe would come here and bring it and combine it with Cristiano and the rest of Real Madrid, and we haven't seen that. Maybe a little bit because there hasn't been that. Oh, Gareth, we need you, because obviously they had Cristiano, but now that the Cristiano's gone, maybe he can take up that mantle.
Yeah, thoughts, Sergio?
Yeah, I believe his role in Wales as taking that to Real Madrid, it's almost impossible, considering the huge roster and the functions we were talking before, especially Isco doing that role. But I think Bale has the conditions and the context, now that Ronaldo has gone, to commandeer the forward attack lanes and trying to learn to play with Benzema and Marcelo. It will depend on him and on Lopetegui.
I think he can play. I mean, he can play with everyone. He's that good. The big problem is a bit, as what Juan Carlos said, that Bale tends to require. Real Madrid is the kind of club where it's not so much about them giving you like the initiative, but you taking it. Like the players who usually succeed best at Real Madrid are the ones who like don't wait for their moment, but actually take it. And Garrett hasn't really been that kind of player for Real Madrid, and that's the biggest issue, like just in terms of mentality.
Well, with Gareth Bale, I think we've all seen some of his technical abilities. He's perfect, as you said. He can play with anyone and anywhere. But I think with his mentality, it might be a little bit of the British idea of just get through the season. It's a big moment situation, and sometimes it's the week to week in Spain that really earns you that spot. The weekly, win it this week, win it this next week. That's what made Cristiano and Messi so big, is that every weekend we see something special from them. And maybe the goalpost or the standards are too high now, and we expect these kind of performances from every player, when maybe 10 years back the Ballon d'Or was being won by a player that was having 10 good performances a season, not 30.
Yes, and journalist Miguel Quintana was actually making that point in an article about Asak, which is like we don't consider Asak to be that good, but like 10 years ago he would be a monster.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would also add that, as you guys were saying, this is a year for Bale. He didn't go to the World Cup. He's had a full summer to rest, to disconnect. And Ronaldo and the announcement of his signing to Juventus has been done with some healthy time gap between now and the start of the trainings, which I think it's this week. So, and Bale is injury-free right now. Am I correct with that? Is he healthy?
Yes.
Well, yes, we don't really know with him, do we?
He's been healthy for like the last 7 months, or like since December, which is a bit of a record for him in the last 4 years. So it would be nice. Yes, it would be nice if we could finally see him play with some continuity, confidence, and with him believing that he's kind of the star of the project. So finally, I just like to talk a bit about how does this change things for Juventus, like tactically, because there's of course the question of will they try to play. I think we can start by asking, like, will they try to play like Dybala, Ronaldo, and Higuain? Would that be the plan?
I think that's too many cooks in the kitchen, no?
It sounds like it, yes.
Oof, that's hard. What's the current Juventus tactics with Allegri? Are they still playing with the double pivot on the midfield?
It's a bit of a 4-4-2 often. I mean, it's Allegri. He switches it a lot, though.
Yeah, I think a lot of it will be. I mean, I'm sure he'll try it at some point, having both of them up front. But I really like the idea of Dybala playing off Cristiano.
Yes.
And so I like the idea of them two combining and giving them runners outside for them to have space for the crosses, but also to create space for Dybala and for Chris, which with Higuain, that will not happen. It will clog up the middle too much.
True.
I think a player like, the white players like Cuadrado can have big seasons having Cristiano there. I think it's a spacing issue at this point, right? Having all three of them who like to play so close to the to the box and in the middle, it's too much. I know Cristiano he can drift wide and he can do the hold up play, but he's not a winger anymore. He's essentially a forward who comes from the side sometimes. So I think having all three of them is not a recipe of success.
That makes me ask something. Do you think Cristiano on that team would be more comfortable playing with Higuain or with a forward like Mandzukic?
I think at this point, Higuain has developed a very good sense of like link up play and the ability to like. It's one of the best things I've seen this season from Higuain. Just like the team has issues like moving forward, and Higuain always makes those runs in which he dropped deep. He makes like really good receptions, turns, and so on. I'm very much liking Higuain's link up play as he got older.
Mm-hmm.
Mandzukic is honestly one of the hardest working strikers I've ever seen, but he's a bit more limited technically.
Yeah.
Well, with Mandzukic, one of the things that I think would be very maybe useful for Juve, particularly in dire situations where might need a comeback, or it's having Mandzukic wide on a fullback and send him those long balls, and we've seen him do it before. And wide on the fullback, bring it down, and Cristiano and Dybala marauding. I feel like
yes,
in dire situations where Juve needs a goal, that's going to be a go-to tactic for Allegri.
That's actually a great point, and that's one of the things that why I was originally thinking about Higuain. But actually Mandzukic does this role better, which is Ronaldo usually needs a player who takes a more advanced position than him, basically to divide the attentions of defenders. But in general, because Ronaldo is better when he's like loading the box, running into the box and scoring, rather than staying in the box. So, which is why he's usually worked best when he works with a center forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I agree. We've seen a more when he's played alone up front. We've seen a more diminished version of Cristiano, and so I think there has to be some way to play in a forward at some point. But I feel that it has to be a forward not on Higuain's mold, and so that's my contention with having Higuain in that role.
I would generally agree with that Mandzukic might be a better fit for him than Higuain. Sorry, Sergio, go ahead.
I was thinking about just what you were saying about having a more advanced player with Ronaldo, and I was thinking that maybe Mandzukic would be the better fit for that. But you know who is having a lot of fun these days? I bet you, Allegri.
Yes and no. I mean, yes, because of course any coach would like to have a man of this talent for a team. But at the same time, it also means that if you play with Ronaldo, it's one player that, for example, you can't ask any defensive tasks from.
Oh, that's very true.
Right, and we know Allegri is not fond of players being very lazy, that way defensively. But I think also he understands the level of the talent with Cristiano, and I think for him, he understands that now with Chris, it's Champions League or bust, really, for him. Mm-hmm. So I think he's definitely going to try to work things out and try to make sure the players are content. He understands. I think that's one of the things that Allegri has done very well is he understands that players need some sort of comforting and some sort of like being taken care of, the man management side of being a manager. And I think he's going to do that well with Cristiano. Allegri is very affable. He's a leader, and I don't think there should be much of a problem in the regard of Allegri being with Cristiano, both in personality and both in the defensive part of this. I'm sure he'll figure something out. I think one of the things for Juve this season is getting Marchisio back fit. He hasn't been playing. I think that's going to be a key role. And, I mean, they've added players. They added Emre Can, who I think can do something similar. So I think I'm pretty up on what Allegri can do and the options that he has.
Yes, and well, in terms of man management, I think, yes, Allegri is good, but I do worry. I mean, he's had a bit of issues with, well, the case of Bonucci is the one that
Bonucci
comes
is
to
the
mind.
one. Yeah.
That's the one case that comes to mind about him having issues with like a star player. So that's my worry.
I mean, you hope a manager like him would learn from a situation like that. He knows he lost an important player at that point, but I think he also knows that Cristiano, as good as Bonucci was, Cristiano is just another universe. He pushes your team to be a favorite to win it all, and
That puts more pressure on everyone.
it puts pressure on everyone, but it also has to be a bit comforting knowing that you have him and that you go into games knowing that Cristiano, Alfredo Relaño would always say, with Cristiano, you're already winning 1-0. And, having that, while it puts pressure to win, it also takes pressure from a lot of other things on the field, just from, knowing that even if you go down 1-0, you have this guy who's going to score a goal if a ball falls to him. So I think he understands too much of the implications of having Cristiano on your team, and I don't think there should be an issue there.
Yeah. Final thoughts, Sergio?
It will be a very fun season for Juventus. I think Allegri he's taking these considerations like gleefully, happily, drawing on his board. That's how I imagine him at home right now. And well, I still think that it was a good move for Ronaldo, good move for Madrid, and we'll see if a good move for Juventus.
Very much so. So I think with this, we're good for the podcast for this week. As I said, we're probably going to try to do something for the World Cup final, a bit of a preview. And if not, I'll just write up something up. We'll see. And if we don't do the podcast for the World Cup final, then that means that we're gonna talk to you next week when reviewing even more transfers, because this is a bit of the fun part of the season, in which or a very exciting part of the season, because you get all the new transfers, so we get to say about how everyone is gonna do really well, and then they all do really terribly during the season.
Hope springs eternal.
Yeah, it's always that hope of the summer. So as always, follow me on Quora, follow Twitter, follow our channel, The Football Engineer, and I'd like to thank Sergio and Juan Carlos very much for their company here. So
thank you,
Jose. We'll be seeing soon.
Yes, and with this, I'd like to bid you all goodbye, and we'll talk to you next week. Thank you for listening to the Football Engineer Podcast.